Hi again, everybody. Just repositioned the camera, but this is to show you that this is the MD6 Bendpak scissor lift. A lot of people have gone over various parts of it, but I'll show you what I've done and the parts to it. Okay, this is the Bendpak here. I've just raised it up a little bit, but it shows you in sort of a small raised position. It comes with the normal short ones for very low. It just slides on these. These all pivot backwards and forwards. It has a stop at the end to stop you from positioning it too far, which will put too much load on these side things. It's designed to go across here and along with its securing point, which is movable. I've put a mark here to stop its position for my cars, which tends to be about this position. So I sort of preset it in that position before that I know that it's in a good position. So it comes with an M12 socket head cap screw, goes on the end. These slide on the end, and then you just you screw that back in again. Doesn't need to be super tight because it stops it's from sliding, but when the weight is on here, this doesn't move at all. So that's the short one, if you need to use that one. Then we've got the medium one. This all comes with the system, and then you put this rubber piece in there. That gives you the medium one. If you want the higher one, then you put these, which are really robust and well made. The way it's machined is fairly heavy. What it does is have a little hole in the bottom, just to stop the air as you put it in. The air doesn't cushion a ride, which is just another plus. That's a good thing. This one also has it on the bottom to stop that. You put that in there, and now you can fit that in there. No problem. That puts it a bit higher, and of course you can adjust it backwards and forwards. What I do like about these ones, on the Bendpak, is that this is one, if you can see that, there is one solid piece. The cheaper ones will have two plates, a wider plate here and a thinner plate down here, and then they weld it. Not as strong as this one solid piece that's actually machined grooves in here. Much more robust and stable. So that's the actual lifts, and these rubber pieces on here, they are very, very tough. Welds are very good around here. That's a proper weld, and it's all made out of very robust things. I've seen these being tubular, seen these rubber pieces that if you put it along the edge of the car on the pinch points, you'll see it actually pushing into the rubber and degrades the rubber after a while. These, not a problem. So that's on this side of it. What I've done is, in each one's exactly the same. You can position it backwards and forwards as normal. The actual lift is probably around just over 900 pounds. That's 450 kilos or thereabouts. So she's fairly heavy. The wheels on the bottom at this side, they roll here. Each pin has been drilled for grease, but what it doesn't have is grease nipples, which is something that I will add later on just to make it easier to actually grease all the pivot points, which is a good thing. Now I'll show you to move it around. You get this dolly, which is a very good dolly. All it is a dolly. The older ones came with the power pack attached to it, which is not as good because now you've got this big power pack attached to it. And when you want to move this around, then it just becomes even more difficult to move it because you've got this big power pack. So the newer ones, they come with just the arm. And what I've done, I made it, you can put the unit all the way down and move it around, but I find it a lot easier if you raise the unit slightly, that puts this edge. I'll reposition the camera so you can actually see. It might be slightly easier. I'll just reposition this at the bottom so you can see here. Right, so when you have this, remember this is still fairly heavy. This is a heavy thing. It's a half a ton, or just under a half a ton. So to move it, because this plate here, this lifts up, which means this pivots down. So what this does is that it just gives you more room. So when you lift this, before you could only go this far. That was your travel. But if you lift the unit slightly, what you can do is get that right underneath, the wheels right underneath it, like that. So it makes it much easier to maneuver it, position it. Remember, it's still heavy as you pull it backwards and forwards, but it just gives you that more control, more lift. That's easier to maneuver it backwards and forwards. So that's something that I've noticed over the while that's made it so much easier. So it has the normal, I'll move the camera so you can actually see. Another mod that I've done, to excuse my moving about on the camera, but what I've done here is I've replaced the normal hose that comes across here, which links the two hydraulic cylinders, and the original one was the hydraulic hose came around here, through the frame, connected onto here, and then linked the two hydraulic cylinders with one hose. But to make it more maneuverable, I disconnect the hose. So there's a QD, a quick disconnect that I've put on here, along with a ball valve. So I've got two hoses to a T, one to either side. So when I take my hydraulic hose, I plug it in here, I turn that valve to open, and then now I can operate the lift up and down. I find that much easier rather than the hose attached all the time. Your pivot point is here, which you're trying to move, and your hose actually is around this front area. So it just gets it more difficult. Plus, with the HPU or the control unit further away, you're limited in the length of hose that you can actually move it. So when you disconnect the hose, you can move it separately. Much easier to plug it back in. But because I have this up from being fully down, if there's pressure on here, just the weight of all these heavy members, it's slightly more pressure on the QD. So when you plug it in, you've got to sort of force it together because you've got a bit of a hydraulic pressure. Not much, but you've got a little bit of hydraulic pressure here. So what I've done is I've put this ball valve in place so I can lock this off, so no pressure goes on the QD, and it's very easy to connect or disconnect the QD. These are all proper hydraulic fittings. These are these are stainless, just because I have stainless. These are proper all hydraulic fittings, so it's designed and meant for up to 3,000 psi and up to 6,000 psi dynamic. So that's not a problem. And what I've done is I've just protected, if I'm doing any welding or any grinding, then this just protects these hoses that I've put a bit of spiral wrap around it. I've also put it on the actual hose that comes from here. It's got a QD 90 degree, and then the hose goes to the control unit. Another mod that I've done is under here there's M20 washers under these M20 nuts that holds these pivot points in position, and I found the way that the edge is on the washers, it was sort of halfway along the actual plate. So I just went out and I bought 4 larger washers, thicker, and I put under there. Then I put the M20 washers and then the nuts on there. So it just spreads the load evenly across this area, wherever it might be, because these are supposed to be rested on here. So which makes a big difference. So that's that's a mod I've done, the hydraulic here with a quick disconnect, or the QD ball valve separate with a T. I'll put that in place. That's a mod I found. It made it easier to maneuver by moving it up. You can still move it when it's fully down. That's not a problem. I can show you that. I'll just connect the hydraulic hose as normal, and we'll just position this, excuse me, while I bring the hose on this side of the camera, connecting here. It's just the way that this hose is lying. I connect it onto here. There's your QD in. Open up the ball valve. Now using the HPU, I can go up and to release, it goes down. You can see the latch in the middle. It's very, very slow right now. I must have it on lock, that's why. Let me just open this up. This latch here has to be in there so this latch can ride over each stop. Otherwise so let's lower this down. As you can see it's very slow only because there's no car on it. It does make a difference with the weight of the car. Now what I've done is those hydraulic hoses, these ones here, the bore of them is pretty small, so that sort of reduces the flow. Not so much on the up, but when it comes down, it's just more controlled because you've got a weight of 2 tons car on top of there, and then the extra weight will make it go down a bit quicker. So I like to control it as it's coming down, so that does help. As you can see, it's going down there. It's all controllable. So that's not fully down yet, but just to show you what it can do. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it up and I'll show you the what other mods I've done. Okay, that's the fully up, as high as it can go. I'll show you here what I've actually done. Move the camera a bit closer. So you see these marks here? That gives you where it actually latches in. So there's 3 positions. Some of them have a lot more increments in there, which is a good thing. These only gives you 3 positions. 1, 2, and 3. And I've just put a mark on here so I know when I get close to the end when it's actually going to latch in and when I can reduce it, which makes a bit of a difference, I think. So this height, I'll move the camera back so you can see. I'll just shift it back off to the side. There's some ramps that I've made just so it makes it easier for sort of cars that are very low that I can actually use. Right, I'll raise this up. That's the full height there that you can see. So if you have, that's a bottom, if you use the top one and you're in this position, that's the bottom of the car here. So your wheel is around here. So if I go off to the side here, excuse me going in front of the camera, but you can see your wheel is around here. So it's easy to work on brakes, suspension. You can get underneath for the engine, no problem. Even though it's lower, to get at the engine, you can get it to the oil pan, you can do the front of it, you can get to a little bit of the transmission, and if you go in between, you can actually get to the exhaust. But because you've got this height difference, you've got two members or three members here that sort of stop here, but I'm limited to the height that I can use. So this is why this was the best compromise in getting this type of lift. So that's the full height of it there. As you can see, where it is placed on the ground is not by a join, which they say at least 6 inches away from any join, and certainly not any of the rollers close to a join, which it doesn't. So another mod I've done is I've made this extra little bracket here, which only clamps to it. It's not welded to anything like that. It's just a supporting arm here, and then 2 clamps that hold this on. And what this does is gives me an extra vise. So I'll show you here. I'll just raise that a little bit. So if I want to use another vise, it gives an option that I can just slide this in and put the pin in like that. And that gives me another vise. If I don't want to use it, I just undo these clamps, slide them over, and this slips off. So there's nothing that's attached, nothing welded, so it doesn't compromise the integrity of the actual lift. But it just gives me another option to use another vise along with the bench vise. So just because this is so secure, you cannot move this unless you really pull on it. So it's a perfect thing for another vise. And if you have any other attachments, you just take that out, and then you can actually put something else. Not to tow anything, put your pin in here, and now you can have a grinder, another clamp, anything else you want to attach to, well, make a new bracket, etc, etc. So that's what I've done. So those are some of the mods that I have done on here. What I've also done, you can see in the background, is this box, this white box. And what this does is when I lower this fully on, I take this, which makes it into a table. So I put that over the unit when it sits on the ground, and then I can raise it, and it gives me a huge tabletop that I can use for putting stuff together. If I'm working on the snowblower, motorbike, that can all take it. That's all hard. That's all 2x4 wood on the sides, and melamine 3/4 inch board on top, and it's plastic coated, so it also saves the unit, because in winter I park the car here. This is still a very small, it's not a workshop, it's a garage, so it's sort of multi-purpose. I use this for a lot of things, and because I'm sort of restricted on room, I've got to have everything adjustable and be able to take apart, move out of the way to move for something else. So this is why all of these are just pieces that are added, that I can easily remove and make it into something that whether it's welding, whether it's woodwork, whether it's working on somebody's motorbike, car, snowmobile, anything wood or metal, doesn't really matter. And I can repair or fix or maintain or modify anything. So this is sort of a one-shop shop. What I'll do is I'll show you another item that how I've done, because I've got this lift, and this lift is fairly large in a small shop. What I've done here is to get an SUV in it. What I've done is I've raised that bar. You can see the garage door. The good thing about this garage is there's 12-foot ceilings, so that gives me an extra height I can work with. But I've had to take that piece there and extend that, move this bar up as much as I can, move the lights up, move the the garage door opener up higher, so now I can get something pretty high up, especially if you're on the double ones, where you can see on the normal one the height is a lot lower. So that gives me a bit more room. So that's my Bendpak. What I'll do is I'll show you. I'll just put this camera down. I'll let the hoist go down, and then what I'll do is, as you can see, it's pretty slow going down because there's no weight on it. Usually it is a lot quicker, which it will speed up just because of the angle and the way it's on that cantilever, or not the cantilever, but the scissor mechanism. As it gets closer down, there's more weight or leverage on the scissor lift, so it does speed up just because it has a tendency for the weight to increase. But that's just a byproduct of the way this design is. What I'll do is I'll show you. I'll disconnect when it gets closer to the ground. I'll disconnect the hydraulics. I'll move my table over and put it on top, and then I'll show you what it's like with the table on top. It's all modular, easy to adjust, can lift up to 3 tons. I've had 2.4 tons, 2.3 tons on it, and there's no flexing or there's no movement. I feel secure if I'm underneath it. It's a good, stable, solid, well designed, well built piece of kit. That's one of the reasons why I went with Bendpak, is because it's designed well, it's built well, it's robust. The welds are very good on it. It's not just little grapes, as you call it, but it's actually proper welds, especially on the structural stuff, because you don't want to go underneath something that you are dubious on its stability. But this is very stable. It would have been nice to go with a 2-post lift in here, but I don't have the room, so the compromise is to get a scissor lift, and this is something that I can move around. The other thing too is, I'll show you. I'll just stop this for a second. When I put that table, I'll lay that on top, and that becomes a table. Then I move the whole unit into the middle of the shop, and then I lower this. This looks like 2 boards, but it's hinged. It's 2 boards, and that becomes a table tennis table. So I'll lower that onto the table, and then now I have a table tennis, and I can adjust it to the right height, and we can play table tennis. And it's fantastic. You use the whole room, but it's really, really good. So what I'll do is I'll get everything, and I'll show you what the table is like on top of it. Okay, now I've put the table back on, and you can see how it looks. That just gives me an extra table, and I've also put the vise in the end, so you can see that just gives me another option where I can. We spoke about the vices earlier, so it's very handy because I can lower it to the deck, and it sits right on the floor if need be. And I can actually drive my snowblower on. I can put a bike on it, a motorbike. I can put something pretty heavy, and it's more than stable enough to stand. 20 people can stand on top of that table without any problem. I don't know if it's 20 people, but a good number of people could stand on. So I can take the weight fairly heavy. And the good thing is, it's adjustable. So whatever height I want to work at, I can just adjust the table. You can see it's just going down now. So whatever height, which saves the back tremendously, having this adjustable height on your table. A little mod too that I made the table white just so it's easy for whoever drives the car in the garage when this is sitting on the ground with a table on. Another reason why the table is made in such a way with the tapered ends. You can see that it's tapered there and on the other side, just so it's easier for a car to drive in, because not only do I drive, but my wife drives in, kids drive in and out. And it also covers it up in winter. We are living in cold winters in Canada, lots of snow and ice, and you come from outside, garage door goes open, in you come, and the car sits over the table. So you get drips because it's warmer in here, drips, water, ice, salt, and I didn't want that on the actual scissor lift. So what I did was, another reason why I made the table is to protect it, so it doesn't get the salt and everything from the winter sitting on top of all the rams, the rods of the hydraulic cylinders and the hoses, pivot points, that sort, which just degrades the whole thing. Another wee little mod that I've done is I've put these little wheels on halfway. So because that is fairly large, what I've done is I lower this down to the ground. I take the I pivot the box onto those wheels, and now one person can just push that tabletop or box to somewhere else out of the way, so I can use the lift. So I've got to make everything modular. Another little mod that I've done is, I'll show you here. I've bought this from another rack, and it just so happens that this rack fits these shoes absolutely perfect. There's a shoe that comes out, there's a place for it, and they all sit in there absolutely. That's all four of the lower ones, the medium ones that you can adjust, and it just sits on the wall. That's the whole thing, and it's pretty impressive. It was just by luck that it actually fit all in there nicely, and it's a perfect spot. So that's just something I've added just to keep things a bit neater, and that's my Bendpak. I'm sure there might be other mods along the way, but I absolutely love it. I should have got it years ago. It would have been nice to have a 2-post lift that I can go right underneath, but it's a compromise in this garage. The garage is only a certain size, even though the height is not too bad, it's 12 feet high. But I've got a few other goodies in the garage that's all up in the roof, and so I'm limited to space. Hence the reason why I got the scissor lift. And I can move it to the other side. I can move it to this side if I want. These little ramps here, my plan is I just put 2x12 boards together and just made those ramps. You can buy other fancy ramps, but they are a lot more expensive. My plan is to paint them, probably a dark gray, I would think, and just to make it, the only thing, because of the length, I've got to store that in winter. But when summer comes, then these will go outside only when needed. The any SUV doesn't need the ramps, but if you get any low car, then you need to drive onto the ramps first to get you the same height, so that it clears the bottom of the scissor lift, and then now it'll lift it up without any problem. And it's fantastic to work on. I really enjoy it, and it makes such an easy thing. It would certainly assist you in working on cars, and plus I use it for all sorts of other stuff too. So I hope you like this video. It's taken me a while to actually do the video. I always find it difficult I have all intention of making the video on various things, whether I work on the car and I see that there's nothing else on YouTube, but I finally got around to it, so I'm sure there's a bit of editing to do, but and I'm sure there will be more coming up. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Hi there. What I didn't show you was the power unit. This is the unit. It's fairly standard through all Bendpak's units. whether it's the scissor lift, the 2-post. There might be slightly larger capacity on the oil, but other than that, they muchness. I've wired this up to 220. I've put a UK plug on here, which is a bit more industrial than the normal plugs that they have in North America. I just happen to have my welder plug in here. That's all 220, and I've just taken that plug, added that, and it goes with a bit of extension if I want to move it, but right now it's just on the side here. And there's the fairly standard hose connections, all 1/4 inch or JIC4. What I've done is I've just bent this handle because the original handle had a more of a downward angle, and since this is mounted here, I've just bent this handle slightly up a bit, changed that position so it's easier to maneuver up and down. So that's thing. I've got an actual temperature sensor in the box here. This is just your normal on-off for lifting, and then you're actually venting it. You're not actually driving the scissor lift down, but you're actually just venting the oil back to tank, which is in here. I've just used transmission oil in here. I've got to be careful. I went with transmission oil not just because of the cost, but because it also works in colder temperatures. Sometimes this garage gets cool, like maybe down to 5 degrees, and what I didn't want to do is put normal 46 oil in there, which is fairly thick viscosity, and then now you're going to struggle to lower the lift because it'll just start to thicken when it's cold. So this is why I went with hydraulic transmission fluid, and it's red. You can see it easily, and should be more than good enough. Power is not a problem. I've got 220 in the garage here that I've wired all in. So for my welder, the compressor, all various bits and bobs, so it was easy to wire this. You can get these units with 110, and it certainly works with 110, but your current is up. You're running at 13 to 15 amps, so you're at the max of what that circuit is. So if you go to 220, it drops to under 10 amps. So it's just easier on the system. And I've got 220 here, so this is why I went for it. So that's just a unit. What I do like about it is it's separate from the actual, you can see here, separate from that trolley, rather than attaching it to the same thing and you got to pull that around whenever you want to move it. So it's better if this is fixed somewhere. The hydraulic hose, you can see all I've done is I've put this covering over it, and because it's on the ground, I've just put some red tape so you can easily see it, just to protect it when you walk across it. When you see it, it just helps just to keep the hydraulic hose integrity very good. So that's my Bendpak.